some Grasslands observing during the summer on episode 441 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We're amateur astronomers who love looking up the night sky, and this podcast is for everybody who enjoys going out under the stars. So, did you get any observing in while you were on your trip, Shane?
No, not really. The weather didn't cooperate. So I was in Cypress Hills on the Alberta side, and it was cloudy the first 3 nights, and then the last night, no, the first 2 nights, and then the last night, it was okay. But I was there with family, and it just you and I have talked about it before. Like it's hard to blend sometimes like astronomy with just vacationing and it
Yeah.
was my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. So, me and my two brothers and their families, we all got together and just celebrated with my parents. And, as such, I just didn't have an opportunity to do any observing. I was hoping to do some solar observing. I brought my little H alpha scope, and my little nephews love looking at the sun. But during the day, it was just we were fighting the clouds the whole time. So it
Yeah.
really turned into sucker holes. And then they're 6 years old and 9 years old, times two. So there's two sets like that. And, doesn't take much for them to be distracted and move on to other things. So no observing, but you got away on a little trip to
Oh, yeah.
Grasslands.
Yeah. Me and Mike and Rick and Peter, we went down to Grasslands for a couple nights. I think Mike did another night too. And yeah, we had pretty good skies the Friday night. Probably getting down like high sixth magnitude
Mhm.
for limiting visual magnitude. We had very thin bit of smoke.
Mm.
It was actually pretty surprising how minimal that impact was. It was still almost seventh magnitude. And then on the Saturday night, I would say 95% of that smoke cleared up. So you could just barely see a little bit right at dusk.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, I think it cleared out whatever remnants were, and it was fantastically clear and transparent that evening, easily well into like I was getting like magnitude 7.2 stars. Still not, it wasn't like a top 10 night, but it was really good, and we had some good good observations for sure.
Yeah. Well, and a not top 10 night in Grasslands is still usually a pretty darn good night.
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
in a spot that dark,
Mm.
there's essentially no light pollution. There's like a little light that's on down by the border, which is I think about 2 dozen kilometers away or more, and it's like this little building. You can't see it; it's
Mhm.
below the horizon, but you can see some of the light from it. If you were somewhere else, you'd think it was like a town or a city or a car dealership or something, but it's not. They just have a couple lights on down there. It's just so dark that you can see things like that.
Mhm. Mhm. So this was not, though, just a pleasure trip in a way. Like this was the annual dark sky event in Grasslands. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, typically we've been doing two a year. Though last year I only did one, and we did do two, but I just did one of the two, and then this year we're just doing the one for whatever reason. That's what the park has asked for. But yeah, public observing session, and yeah, they're doing them a little bit different. They set up a couple tents sort of end to end, and they heavily limit it. We've done these in the past. And I think one year we had like 300 to 400 people show up.
Mhm.
And it's neat and all, but the challenge that we were running into is that many of those people's commitment was very low.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was not free, but it was essentially free, and the park was doing it as such. And I think, like, I don't speak for the park or anything, but I think that in our discussions, anyway, myself and the park, we concluded that it might be better to try to place some upper thresholds of around like whatever, like 50 or so people
Mhm.
seems like a generally good number. And to figure out a way, which they do, like they handle all that kind of business end of things, to get people who are fairly interested in what we're doing. So you don't get as much people that are just kind of coming because it's cheap or free or whatever, and then they have a quick look. Or I mean, I had people show up one year and they spent the whole time looking at their cell phones or asking us questions about cell phone apps, and then they never even would look through a telescope and then just walked away, and it was just kind of a weird thing. But anyway, everybody there was fairly committed. Two very different crowds on the first night. Well, we do these sets of presentations. They My friend Caitlin, she offered to come on the show actually in the
Oh,
fall.
awesome.
Yeah, so that should be cool.
Yeah, she's
Um,
a like a staff worker in Grasslands, right?
yeah, she is, but she's just going to come on of her
Yeah.
own personage, not as a representative of the park or anything. She's
Okay.
got a neat project on the go there that I think she wants to talk about. So
Oh, okay. Yeah,
we'll
that's awesome. She's
yeah.
a great person. I always enjoy talking to her.
Yeah, she's a bit of an entrepreneur, so
Yeah.
she's got a little bit of a business going there. So not her first,
Mm-hmm.
not her first, but pretty interesting project. Anyway, so she does a talk on like the ecology of the night sky, touches lightly on astronomy, and then they have a bat interpreter, and he did one on bats, and he has like an ultrasonic bat detector and some other stuff there, which is pretty cool. And then I just do one on sort of more directed night sky ecology and the impacts of darkness and or lack thereof on human health, and then what you can see in the park in the nighttime sky. I make it like a slightly longer presentation, and then if it's clear, I deliver it in a more succinct manner, which is what we did both nights because we had essentially very good skies
Mm-hmm.
on both nights. One was good, pretty good, and the other one was very good. Yeah,
Yeah.
not quite excellent, but yeah, we
Yeah.
had a good time. Lots of
Cool.
people.
Yeah, that's good. Is it the same kind of area to present that we've done in the past where they just sort of put a screen up and a bunch of chairs, or have they moved it so that the screen was a little easier to see in the sunlight? I know
Yeah.
we've
So
struggled with that.
what they do is they it's a pretty elaborate setup. Last year was the first time we had some challenges. This year it went pretty well. They set up these two giant event tents, sort of end to end,
Mm,
and so on. In one of them, we have the screen projector and some of these portable batteries, and us as speakers, and like a couple rows of people. And then the other one, we have the rest of the rows of people, and then have like coffee and tea and treats and everything in the back, and planispheres and moon gazers and all that kind of good stuff. So it's a pretty substantial facility. These are massive event tents. They had one before, but then they bought this other one, and so it works quite well like that. They're very, very substantial. So like you'd have to have a pretty significant storm to to have any concern that they'd get knocked down or whatever. I mean, I guess a storm can knock just about anything down, but they're all but a permanent structure. So yeah, it's pretty good.
yeah, that sounds like a better way to do it than sometimes in the past. So that's cool. Um, the crowd. So you did it two nights. Did you notice if it was kind of the same people coming back for night two, or did you have a pretty good sort of refresh on night two and with a bunch of different faces?
Yeah, totally new, different crowd both
Yeah.
nights. Like we've noticed the past several years in doing it. Initially, I think, as you'll recall, we'd often get many of the same folks,
Hmm.
but that seems to be more the exception. In fact, I don't know that I ran into any repeat customers. There was a few people the first night that said they might come for the second night.
Hmm.
But we noticed that in general, like that, the campground clears out, and then almost all new people pull in the next day,
Hmm.
even on a weekend, Friday versus a Saturday night kind of thing. So it's a little bit surprising that way because it sure is a heck of a long way from anywhere. But I think
Hmm.
in general, people are going to East Block and then West Block and then wherever else they go after that. They're just kind of coming around and spending maybe 24 or 30 hours in the park, and then on their way, which yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to see everything in a day there, but I guess that's
Yeah.
just what people are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Was there anybody from great distances? I know times in the past we've had people from all parts of the US and overseas from Germany and other European countries. Were you able to catch any of that from for where people traveled from?
Yeah, so there was lots of people sort of from across Canada. We had lots of folks there like from Ontario and East, and then had a whole pile of people for the first time, and people that had come up independently from the nearby states like Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming. Like one of the nights, I think the second night, I think there was like a dozen or more people, like a huge percentage of them were from down there. So I don't know whether there was like advertising that Grasslands has done in that area, but whatever it is, whatever they're doing certainly worked because I can't ever recall even hardly meeting anybody from the adjacent states. Certainly had
Mhm.
lots of people from the states before,
Mhm.
but I was kind of surprised to see so many people just from over the border.
Yeah, that's good. Well, certainly convenient for them. It's not that far of a drive, and
No.
for some of the
Yeah.
Montana folks, it might even be closer than it is for you and me.
Oh, well, yeah, this one person said it was 6 hours
Oh,
for
okay.
them,
All
like
right.
from the populated wherever it is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, well, for me, it's like 4.5 hours. So
Yeah.
it's not a hugely different drive because like coming from Calgary, so to speak, maybe ish, sort of in the
Yeah.
same ballpark. But yeah, it was a little bit different. So the first night we had about 60 or 65 people
Hmm.
and did we did the three talks, zero questions. I don't think there was a single question. And then everybody wanted to get out, look through the telescopes. And I did a sky tour, but there
Okay.
was, I would say, modest interest in the sky tour.
Yeah.
And then people were pretty keen to get back to the telescopes. And oh man, probably 20 or 25 of the people stayed until about 1 a.m.
Wow, that's really good. That's awesome.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
you had
quite a
what
few stayed late.
four telescopes from you, Mike, Peter, Rick, and then I assume probably a few
Two or
park
three from the
telescopes.
park, and they
Yeah.
set up a astrophotography station because they
Oh,
have two
really?
or three. I think this is somewhat coincidental, maybe, but maybe not. There's a few of the park staff, like newer staff, that have come out from Ontario that are into astrophotography. So they may have just requested to be stationed at Grassland since it's so good for astronomy. And yeah, those guys put me to bed both nights, basically. Yeah, they were getting sunrise photos, I think.
Really?
They were leaving. I heard them leaving when I was getting up in the morning. So they stayed all night. But they're able to go back and sleep all day or whatever, but they
Yeah.
kind of sort of worked the event. But they were just doing their own astro photos. But yeah, so the first day, yeah, it was kind of funny. The attendees, they listened and then they just wanted to be at the telescopes, somewhat interested in a sky tour, and then they back to the telescopes and lots of interest just right at the scopes. I had people at my scope like for hours like that night, as did everybody else. And then the next night, it was just like a completely different crowd. They wanted to sit in the tent and ask quite a few questions, which was great, like super engaged. And then they came out, kind of looked through the scopes a bit, and you could hear people wanting to know like when the sky tour was happening. And so they really wanted it at like 10 o'clock, like kind of when we hinted it would happen. And I went over right at 10 and did the sky tour, and they wanted like the world's longest sky tour. Like I gave them everything I had. I did an hour, and people were still sitting there wanting more. And my voice
Jeez.
just finally gave out, and I was just done.
Yeah, that's a long tour for sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was pretty good. And yeah, and Caitlin was there kind of acting as my spotter, and because we,
Yeah.
sort of do it right and safe when we're using um, you know, the
Lasers.
tool, yeah, the tools that we're using,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Mostly they couldn't even see it because I'm using such a weak laser. So I was using my finger a lot of the time, but it was all good. They figured it out. But yeah, it was a different crowd. And then after I did the sky tour, there's a few people that hung out and looked through telescopes, and then they left. And so the park staff that were kind of there the night before, were a bit bagged. So They decided to take off at 12:30 or so, and the rest of us hung out for about another hour, an hour and a half, and we had a really neat observation of the natural air glow phenomena.
Hmm. Okay.
So yeah, yeah, it was pretty wild. I got a hint of it the night before.
Hmm.
I wasn't too sure. So what the air glow is, it's these they kind of look in a photograph anyway, like extremely weak aurora, but often you'll see them perpendicular to the Milky Way and often very much to the south. And at any given time, the air is fluorescing. The air will give off weak photons. And typically under, even pretty darn decent skies, you just can't see this. It's very difficult. One of the I guess resources that somebody can go to look at to see this. I mean, you can just Google air glow and you'll see lots of photos of it. But like on the ISS, when they take photos of the Earth, when they get a cross section of our atmosphere, sometimes there's like a thin green line that they photographed, and that's the air glow. And you don't necessarily always get it, but it's somewhat omnipresent. So if you
Hmm.
do get a dark enough night there, there's probably like a 20 or 30% chance that you might see some. But we had a massive display of it right out of the south, and a little bit to the east. And after the public kind of left and our eyes kind of sort of deeply dark adapted, but just before the park staff left, we just had a fantastic view. It almost looked like a maple leaf coming out of the you know, uh, I guess more or less the eastern horizon. It had this big band that went up into Cassiopeia right from the eastern horizon, another one cutting out and going up into like Aquila, another one coming straight up and going up into Cygnus. I mean, it was huge. And I went over to the astrophoto guys and they said they were taking photos of it, but didn't realize that it was visible with the eye. So I hung out with one of them and showed him, and he was just like, "Yeah, that's it. We were photographing it." And so it was kind of cool. So I'm hoping that I'd be able to get the photographs from them at some point in time, just
Hmm.
to kind of compare. But yeah, we all saw it. It was super easy to see once. Well, I guess I noticed it and started pointing it out to people. Yeah, it was really really cool to see, just because it's well, you need just to be in an absolute pristine sky
Yeah.
in order to see this sort of event.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation. I've seen it a couple of times there, but nothing. I've never seen it, as you just described it. That's very pronounced. So pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen it before, like very subtly, like
Yeah,
sort of in the Cassiopeia region, or
yeah.
sometimes to the east and the south. Certainly a couple times, even just people have somebody was taking a photograph of me for a magazine once, and they kept taking the photo and taking the photo. I was like, what are you doing? Why do you like just it's not going to matter. You can't see my face or anything. My eyes are closed. No one's going to notice. And they said, "Oh, I keep getting this darn green thing. It must be some sort of flash from somewhere." So I went and looked, and I was like, "No, that's the air glow." But we couldn't really see it that night, or maybe just a little. But that was the most pronounced that I've seen it. It was really, really neat.
Yeah. Well, right place at the right time comes through, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so with the public, what were some of the like, objects that got the biggest reactions from the crowd?
People really wanted to see the Andromeda galaxy,
Okay.
so showed them that, detailed out like the Milky Way, showed them, the double cluster and all those stars. One of the things people were pretty curious about seeing, like in my presentation, I talked about, the Milky Way. It just looks like these billowy clouds, but even when you point just a pair of binoculars or one of our small telescopes at it, you're going to see it break up into stellar points, or a lot of stars maybe mixed in with some clouds in the background, but in general the cloud will disappear for the stars. And so people were pretty keen to see that, and they were really taken aback by that,
Mhm.
to be able to actually, to sort of witness that for themselves, where they're looking at it, it looks like a cloud, and then you look, and I would just point my telescope at, like the Scutum star cloud, or M24, or the steam coming out of the spout of the teapot of Sagittarius, and they just love that, like standing there looking at it with their eye and then looking through the telescope, like, oh, it's all stars. This is amazing. Just people were just really taken aback by that. I probably spent like about a third of my time just showing that to people because
Hmm.
it's so remarkable there. Just because under those skies, like through my telescope, you're easily seeing like I don't know whatever it is, like 12th or 13th magnitude stars. Like even in a low power eyepiece, it's quite phenomenal. So like the amount of stars that you're seeing when you point it at one of these star clouds is quite ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great object for public night or even just personal viewing. You mentioned that there's some requests for the Andromeda Galaxy. Was there some other desired objects to look at that people were asking for?
Yeah, in particular, the one thing that kind of took me a bit by surprise was the T Corona Borealis, which
Oh,
is the star that has a pretty good chance of going nova
mm,
here in the coming months. I think maybe even slightly overdue. I think it went nova like in the 1880s and 1960s or something to that effect, and then. It's kind of sort of due or maybe slightly overdue at this time. But I mean, it could be one of those things where it goes either anytime between now and the next however many years, like because it's still a recent discovery, having only been witnessed two times before over the span of 140 odd years, right? Or 100, not quite even 150 years. So, yeah, I pointed out where that was and the fact that several of the stars in Corona Borealis are variable and that kind of thing. But yeah, I was just surprised that people had sort of picked up on that. I think a lot of people were expecting to see it when they went there. I think they were expecting to actually witness the nova go
oh
off.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so because several people were coming up to me with their cell phones. Have you heard about this? Like, and several of the articles, although I'm not sure what the sources were exactly, but they were showing it to me, and if one sort of was even somewhat interested in astronomy, but just kind of reading articles online, you could very easily misinterpret it as this is happening like right now, today, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
just because of the headline grabbing
Yeah.
um, algorithms or whatever that are writing this stuff.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because multiple people at work in the last, I don't know, 2 months or so have asked me about this supernova. It's definitely one of those newsworthy stories or headlines, I guess, that the media has latched on to. So I'm not surprised you got asked about it down there.
Yeah, but it'll be nova, not a supernova, right?
Yeah, fair. Yeah, yeah. My bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think people are getting confused about that, and I think that's one of the things that it's just going to look like a star. I mean, in general, most people can't even see any of these stars in their backyard. So, not really exactly sure why some people are getting so excited about it, considering everybody, is probably putting in 10,000 kilowatt power lights in their backyard.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. And then of course, like on that note, like lots of people asking about like the Starlink and other satellites, of
Mhm.
which, yeah, it's not great for astrophotos long term. Not so sure about all these satellites. However, like from my perspective, the big concern is all these massively overpowered LEDs that people just seem to be installing everywhere.
Mhm.
Because like holy smokes, like somebody put one in across the water. It's at a dock or something, and it's not on very often. But when it's on, I mean, Shane, it literally lights up the entire lake surface
Shay,
at the
this is at
lake.
your cottage.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and I don't even know how powerful a light that has to be. Like it must be like 100,000 candle power or something. Like it would be as bright as your light on your iPhone, if you so have one, standing like I'm gonna say like 10 feet away from me.
Mhm.
Like it's just unbelievable how bright these things are, and the spectrum is like just absolutely tuned to be piercing
Mhm.
right into the peak visual of your eye. I mean, it is just these lights are just the bane because you don't even need that many of them. Like it used to be, well, sure, like everybody puts 100 those double 120-watt lights up, yeah, if everybody puts those up, it's gonna really diminish what you can see in the nighttime sky, say in a small community of a couple hundred people like where my cabin is. But literally, this is the situation where if 10 people put up lights like that, it's just done. Like it's like you're living in a stadium, you know. It's really quite incredible. So on that note, I was chatting with some of the folks at Last Mountain Lake Conservancy, and they're actually talking about striking some sort of dark sky preserve of some sort. So I was hoping they would get in touch with me by now, but I'll try to hunt them down and reach out to them and see perhaps what we can do together. Because certainly it doesn't just impact astronomy, which is oddly enough something I think many people out there are interested in cottage country, because people like to get a cabin and go out and have a fire and look at the stars or whatever. But I mean, holy smokes, like this is not going to be a very long battle if people keep putting up these kind of lights for sure.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Not good news, but hopefully you can leverage the what was the name? The nature group or
Last Mountain, I think it's like the Last Mountain Nature
yeah.
Conservancy of some sort, or it's
Yeah.
part of the, I mean, it's government funded of some sort. But
Mhm.
anyhow, they have it on their agenda to do something,
Yeah.
simply because it's a migratory path for birds as much as for astronomy. So
Mhm.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Oh, that's good to
yeah,
hear.
something can be done there anyway.
Yeah. So after the crowds at Grasslands went back to their tents and campers for the night, what observing did you do for yourself? What lists were you working on or projects?
Well, nothing too specific. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm like I'm basically working. Like it's like a job for the weekend, really it is
Yeah. Yeah,
for
it
me
is.
anyway. So I had my image stabilized binoculars, and Peter and I just hung out, and we looked at just a whole pile of different things in binoculars. We did like about an hour of binocular observing together,
Hmm.
and went back and forth on like Andromeda and the double cluster, and things of that nature. Alpha Persei cluster, like with the Alpha Persei, you can see like the stars resolving even just with your eye. It's pretty incredible. Um, Took a look at all the usual stuff like M22, the globular, and took a look at the Swan Nebula, M17, M16, M11. Took a look at like the Pelican and North American with binoculars and all that kind of stuff. Just a bunch of the globulars and Ophiuchus, and yeah, just like a lot of the star clouds. Really took in the star clouds quite a bit. So yeah,
Hmm.
it was a lot of fun just kind of panning around and looking at all these different targets, Ruprecht 147, and yeah, different things of that nature. Yeah, it was pretty good. But the
Hmm.
one highlight for the weekend, one of the reasons why I wanted to do it on this weekend, in particular on Saturday night, was I wanted to show people something which I think in general this was a rare event on Saturday night, and I think in general people thought it was neat-ish, but it just goes to show that these rare events in general, I think the public just doesn't quite grasp. But we certainly enjoyed it,
Hmm. That's
which
good.
was yeah. Do you know what I'm referring to?
No.
Was the occultation of Spica in Virgo by the moon, by the first quarter
Oh,
moon.
okay. Yeah.
And so the reason I really wanted to make sure I was in a good spot with good horizons to see this is that when you have a star or a planet or whatever it is, right in the same field, very, very close to the moon. In this case, somebody said that they could see it coming out, but I don't know that anybody saw it come out from behind the moon. I'm not sure that it was quite visible from there. I think that it was missed. If it happened, I'm still not 100% sure. But anyway, we could see Spica right next to the moon. And when this happens, and Spica's a little bit blue, the blue color is grossly exaggerated.
Oh, okay.
And the amount of blue that you could see on Spica was it was just like an emerald blue. It
Hmm.
was just absolutely incredible. So we spent like an hour with people showing them this.
That's awesome. And that was just naked eye that you could see the blue?
No, well, yeah, well, you could see like with your eye through the telescope, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Because the moon, like you could see it after about maybe 15 or 20 minutes next to the moon. But just after it came out or became visible, um, yeah, you had to look through the telescope. It was just too close.
Right. Right. Well, that's
And
pretty cool. That's a neat
yeah,
observation.
yeah, because I think Spica is what, like a first magnitude star, something 1.4.
Yeah.
And yeah, just to see them together in the sky like that is, I think, super cool. And it's worth sort of the price of admission. I think in general, like I think people thought it was kind of neat, but I think people just in general perhaps don't understand that usually you can't see the star colors like that um, so stark against
Hmm.
something else.
Hmm.
So they thought it was neat. Everybody had a look and enjoyed it. But for those of us who do lots of astronomy, we were just like astounded at the color. Like it really was quite stunning. It was very, very beautiful to see. And then as it moved away and the distance became greater with Spica to the right or to the west of the moon, um, and it grew dark, the the view the view of Spica, the moon, and the Milky Way, even though you have a quarter moon in a sky that dark, it's really hard to describe the in many ways the minimal impact that a quarter moon can have. I mean, yeah, it impacts the view, but we were still getting like magnitude 6.2, magnitude 3, and then the detail in the Milky Way was still stunning. So, for example, my cabin is about that limiting magnitude on a moonless, dark, clear, very clear, transparent night. That's about it. On all but the best nights, I'm getting 6.2, 6.3 on an average night,
Hmm.
or a pretty good night actually. And so this was already as dark as that, even with a quarter moon in the sky. Yet the detail in the Milky Way far surpassed. I mean, just what I get at the cabin just doesn't even hold a candle to the way the Milky Way appears under those sky conditions. Even though like the limiting magnitude is approximately the same, it's just the nuances in the sky and the absolute stunning beauty of that detailed Milky Way, with the moon about whatever it was, 35 or 40 degrees to the west of Scorpius. Um, and to be able to see Libra there as well, and then Spica sitting there, and the rest of the constellations all hung appropriately. It without any trees around, and the event tent sort of in the distance, and a couple trees in the distance, but otherwise a completely unobstructed horizon. There's just nothing that compares to it. It feels like you're in a planetarium. It really does.
Hmm.
It's absolutely stunning.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool comparison. Just, what it was like there with the moon compared to your cottage. Yeah, very, very interesting.
Yeah, and like the moon just didn't have that much of an impact, and we knew that we were going to be fighting a lot of twilight still, but the way we're setting up these events is a little bit different, where we have more commitment and buy-in from the people who are attending, the way that they've set them up. So people are a little bit more amenable to hanging out and looking at the moon for a while and looking at some stars and, seeing the stars come out, asking a lot of questions about the telescopes and typically how we get into this and all this. 'Cause people are a little bit more engaged than they typically have been in the past. It's a great event. And I brought down like, I don't know, like I bought like 500 moon gazers, to populate the Grasslands staff for the foreseeable future. So they're well outfitted, and so people were taking those, and then they were outfitting people with red lights and all this kind of paraphernalia too. So yeah,
Hmm.
it was a really good time. Yeah, we had lots of people, but for me, yeah, it's kind of almost like a working set of evenings because, I'm basically hired on as a you know, staff or an interpreter or night sky interpreter of some sort they call it. I forget. It's kind of funny to think about, but I mean, I just do it for fun, and um, it's sort of a good thing I think to do to help promote the park and keep things dark. And then as well, we don't really have to do too much on the planning end or organizing people or handling money or anything like that. The park just sort of takes care of all of that,
Mhm.
and it's a lot of fun to hang out with them, and we've gotten to know them quite well over the years. So that's a lot
Mhm.
of fun too.
Yeah, that's awesome. So daytime, it was a little warm, probably 30 degrees here. I'm guessing a little warmer there. It usually is. What did you do during the day to keep occupied and pass the time?
So it was not that warm.
Oh, wow. Well,
Um,
that's kind
yeah,
of good.
Yeah, so we got down there. It was 29 degrees when I got there, but it wasn't totally sunny. We had a lot of
Mhm.
clouds coming through from time to time. And so when the clouds went in and it was very dry, sort of when the clouds covered the sun, it was fine. We hung out with Mike Shade and then set up our tents and then went and did our thing. But yeah, we just kind of Rick and Mike and Peter and I just sort of hung out and chatted, and mostly they made fun of me, I believe. But yeah, other than that, yeah, we just sort of hung out, and I brought down some old astronomy magazines, and Mike had some astronomy books, and yeah, we just kind of talked about a few things. Yeah, wasn't too wild. And then on Saturday, it was nice, like it was quite good actually. Daytime high, mostly it was like 24.
Okay. Well, that's not
think
bad at all. That's very comfortable.
I think there was like it got pretty cloudy for a while. I went down and like
Yeah.
most of us like went and lay down for an hour. I don't know how much
Gee.
sleep we all got, but it was cool enough that you could lay in your tent and kind of doze a bit. So that wasn't too bad.
Yeah,
And then
that's a rarity for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. And then around like 5:30 or so, the sun did come out for like the end of the day, and it totally like it was weird because there was storms going around us all day on Saturday. And even when we got there on Friday, I took a photo of this crazy storm as many people did. And Saturday all day, like we woke up, we saw a storm coming in. It was supposed to pass through at like 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or something. And I was like, oh, and it was a bad one. And when we had gotten down there, there was tornado warnings all the way down. But all the storms missed us. We had 10 minutes of large but sparse raindrops where you wouldn't even go and get in your car. It was just getting to the point where you started feeling like you might get wet here in the next minute or so, but then it stopped.
Hmm.
Maybe we got 5 or 10 minutes of these big raindrops, but it kind of felt good more than anything. It was like getting hit with little shot glasses of water here and there. Like you could stand there for 5 seconds before you got a drop, kind of thing. So yeah, it
Okay.
was it was neat Saturday. Yeah, not too hot and mostly these clouds and storms going by. So we kind of sat there. It was pretty entertaining to sit there and watch like massive storms go by, hearing the thunder. And yeah, they had hail in Valmarie and nearby areas and some tornado warnings. Not right there though. Like we were totally fine.
Hmm.
And then towards the end of the day, I mean, it really looked like we might not get any clear sky because it was totally overcast at 4 o'clock. But by the time 5:30 rolled around, totally clear. And definitely by the time we went up top at 8, I couldn't believe it. I for sure thought we would be clouded out. But yeah, it was completely 100% clear. Lots of nighthawks. We saw like nighthawks are these birds that fly around at dusk, and they had them in the presentation, of course, because they're a bird that needs a dark natural environment. And yeah, we had the first night we had tons. We had this one, it just like was flying circles around people. Every single person saw it. It was crazy. Yeah, so that was pretty neat. Heard the coyotes quite a bit, and yeah, there was only one bison nearby. That was
Okay.
yeah, sort of it for the wildlife. Yeah, it was pretty neat.
All right. Well, last question, Chris. What was your favorite Michelin star restaurant in
Uh,
Grasslands West Block?
Yeah, well, Mike had some fruit and coffee for breakfast, so it's always Mike's. But I
Yep.
made like this pad thai, and it my stomach wasn't good
Oh
on the
no.
weekend. Yeah, I think I had a bug. There's a lot of people have had it at work, and so
Hmm.
my gut is still not 100%. So I didn't really eat that much over the weekend, really. So
Mm.
yeah, one of those things. Like I drank so much fluid that I couldn't hold any more fluid, and then I still was like thirsty. So
Oh, weird.
yeah, kind of the way it goes down there. But it wasn't so hot. Yeah, it was I would say maybe the most pleasant or second most pleasant experience I've had down there in the summertime because at night it cooled off, but it didn't get freezing cold. So typically if it's in the 20s, like I've been there when it's been in like 21, 22 in July, and then it got so cold at night.
Mhm.
Like almost frost, or I think I've even seen frost down there in June anyway, and definitely first part of July and first part of August. Um, yeah. However, it was very pleasant at night. I think one night it was 14, and the next night it was like 13 or something. Yeah,
Wow. Well, that's
yeah,
perfect, really. Can't
yeah.
ask for better conditions day and night by the sounds of it.
Yeah. The only thing is going that early. Of course, it's you got that sun coming up so darn soon, like whatever it was,
Mm.
like
Hmm.
5 or 5 after 5 or something like that. So you have to park strategically. And then, I think the first morning I slept until 8, but the second morning I was really up at 7. And yeah, so that's a little bit rough. I was pretty tired when I got home. So got home, went to bed and slept for 2 hours, then got up for 2 hours, then went back to bed and
Yeah.
then slept like 10 hours and then got up and went to work. I get some work done on Monday. In previous years, I've been taking the Monday off too to
Hmm.
recuperate, but I just get too much stuff to do at work. But I was sort of like, I worked a full day, but it was probably like a half day worth of work kind of thing, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, but yeah, it was fun. It's
Yeah.
always good. No listeners this year. I think I had some listeners the past couple of years or 3 years. But yeah, there was no listeners this year that attended, which is fine. I always thought, that the Grasslands event, I always imagined that it would become more of an amateur astronomy thing because it is so good for astronomy. Like this has got to be one of the top places on the surface of the Earth to do it. It's sort of in this Goldilocks zone of being around 3,000 feet. There's no external lights at all. There's like the odd car that might drive by in the distance or whatever, miles away. It's still annoying, but just because it's so dark.
Mhm.
And then it is so incredibly dark there, easily getting into the seventh magnitude on like an average night. An average night there is by far way better than the darkest sky I've seen anywhere else. And although it's a little ways, considering how good it is, I think it definitely is. I mean, there's no question. It's not that I think it is. It's a world-class astronomy site. And so it is kind of a little bit surprising. You'll hear like, oh yeah, there was astronomers down last weekend, the weekend before, kind of thing. But it's sort of like every weekend there's like 3 or 4 astronomers that go to the park. But I thought probably what would happen is that people would just congregate on the weekend that we would do the star party or whatever, and then we could have like a star party and then have public observing as part of that, which is pretty typical for the star party. But that's not how it pans out. Like it
Mhm.
just ends up being that people just go and do their night whenever it works for them, which is fine, I guess. And then we're just there doing that outreach. But kind of in essence, though, people sort of become like a bit of a free rider on the work that goes into like keeping it a dark site. So, but I digress on that.
Well, sounds like a wonderful trip, and thanks for sharing all of those details and aspects of public observing and the observing that you got in for yourself. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to have Caitlin on in the fall. Like when she gets
Yeah.
done with the park, because she doesn't want to come on and be like the park person, because she's going to talk about her non-park project. Like she's an entrepreneur, which is pretty cool, and she's an amateur astronomer, and she's a pretty good one. And she lives there and observes in the park and has done lots of astronomy over like 15 or almost 20 years now in the park. So that is a unique experience. She's probably done more astronomy in that park than just about anybody else, although
Mhm.
I'm probably pretty close second on that one. But yeah, and just her perspective on it all. And then she also wants to talk about like being an interpreter and doing public outreach and how that's done. And she's about the best person I've ever met that does that kind of stuff, as I'm sure you know as well.
Yeah, yeah, she's great at that. And just a wonderful person.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. She's always a lot of fun to get together with and do these events. We kind of tag team and play off each other a bit. Last year, she crossed the black and the red wires on our battery pack, and it started like spritzing some pretty good sparks. Well, we're inside a tent, which is never like a great sign. So I was pretty stoked to learn that she'd figured out how not to do that. So that was fun. I gave her a good ribbing for that one. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
all
yeah,
good.
that's fair.
Cool. Anything else?
That is all, sir.
Awesome. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. And please subscribe, share the show with other stargazers you know. Send us your show ideas, observations, and questions to actualastronomy@gmail.com.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.